Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's September 28th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And starting out looking at our daily chart, you can see that we made another new low here, lower than yesterday. We started, I think most of this was during the overnight, and we rallied pretty much the whole day. It looks like we're coming out of this. We're going to rally off these lows and maybe relieve some of this oversold pressure. So we were overdue for a bounce. Uh, Still doesn't mean that we can't turn down again, but you can see we're clearly bouncing off this trend channel line, off this yellow channel here. So, but we're stuck between the midline and the lower line, and we still closed just at the brown line, which anything really below that kind of purple color there on down is oversold. So we've been way oversold for some time now. But this is a weak market, and many times when you get an overshoot of a target like this, like a measured leg, and you come back and test it, if prices turn down again, we could go much lower. Uh, it's another indication the market may be extremely weak. So we'll see how it goes. It's really hard to know what's going to happen from here. Again, it wouldn't surprise me to see a rally here now. Um, and how big a rally, we don't know because I never expected this rally either, but we had it. So, and you'll see that in bear markets. So I believe we're in a bear. I mean, if you look at this, I think it'd be hard to argue we're not in a bear market now. We just made a new low for the contract, and we've made multiple new lows the entire contract, this entire December contract. We continue to make new lows, and we just made another new low. So anyway, um, let's flip over. I did want to show you one other thing too. I'm going to show you our intraday chart for the 2000 tick chart on the ES. It doesn't look nearly as positive as the MES. I'll usually keep the MES running in the background just to keep an eye on it because a lot of people are, newer people trade it. I like to keep an eye on it and just watch it occasionally and just see how it's doing. And but it looks super bullish compared to the ES chart, and I'll show you. Just see. I don't know. I haven't really noticed that before. Maybe it hadn't been a real strong trend on one and not the other. Maybe it happens a lot. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I haven't, but I've never noticed it before. But I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's flip over to the again. Here's your MES, and you can see it's just the same. I mean, it's real steep, and there's no break. Clear trend working up through there. Prices bounced off of it every time. We didn't come back to it a lot because the market was pretty strong. But this just looks a lot more bullish to me. Um, I'm, I just I haven't noticed that in the past. Maybe it's just one of those days. Maybe it's like this every day. I'm not sure. But anyway, um, let's get back to the ES and we'll go through the trades. And just one more thought on that. Some of you maybe could have found the trend. I tried it. I just couldn't make it fit well enough. I think you had to play it. I think to trade it, you really wanted to play it the way I played it here to give you a better idea. You really had to get into this shorter term stuff to get an idea of what prices were doing because this is mostly sideways with a failed breakout. Then we shot up and it's mostly sideways again with another failed breakout. I didn't put the other sideways range on there, but it's pretty much what we saw all day. We go up and then we just kind of work sideways. So if you saw it like that, that's probably correct. So, and then finally we went higher again. And so anyway, there's several trades in here. We had some more late afternoon, really after about 1:30. Not much going on there. Um, but anyway, let's zoom in. We'll go through the trades and we'll wrap up another day here. Okay, 7 o'clock came just as this bar shot up through here. If you were sitting at your desk and saw this right here, it's a little congested, but it's bouncing off that clear trend channel line or trend line there, and it's a relatively small bar, like 10 ticks. So I mean that's fairly low risk with a good bit of room back to the EMA. So if you were sitting here, you could take that trade. I'll just mark it green. But notice we run up, we get a first entry short, second entry short, and it fails right there. But you also get a new high here, first entry, then it turns back down, and when it breaks higher there, it's a second entry. And that confirms that trend line. And that turns out to be a very nice move, actually. And if you were able to, depending on how you played it, if you caught a runner, that might have been all you needed today. This might have been all you needed today, because you definitely probably get a runner right here. So it's a lot of good opportunity right there, right out of the gate. And if you didn't catch one of these moves, this is the thing with what we're seeing lately, is if you don't catch the move early on close to, sometimes all you get's the reversal, but a lot of times you get, like here, you got a second entry long, and if you catch that, then you get a nice move. But if you don't get another opportunity to get in. They just leave you behind. And then notice you get a leg back, first entry, leg back. So that's a second entry long. You've already got a break and a new low, and you're expecting prices to try to make a retest of this high. And then it breaks lower and fails and turns up, so you get a higher low after a second entry. I don't know that I would trade this on the engulfing bar because it looks a little congested, but when this closes up here, I wouldn't have a problem going long. And you might let it break higher and use a limit order and give yourself 2 or 3 ticks, see if you can get a little better entry just to shave off some of the size of that bar. It's 21 ticks. Honestly, that's not a very big bar lately, but you could have easily shaved off. Let's just see what you could shave off that one. You could have shaved off 6 ticks, 1.5 points. Makes it much more reasonable. But you got to be careful trying to do that with limit orders, because what'll happen is you'll miss the best trades. Like right here, if you tried to use a limit order on this, you probably get left behind and you don't get to make that move. And it's a clear second entry, a failed second entry short. You're looking for prices to go higher off this main trend line. You don't want to miss trades like that. So I hear a lot of people saying, well, I only want to use limit orders. Well, if you do, you're going to miss the best trades, and you're probably not going to get many runners off of it either. And if you're okay with that, that's fine, because it is a much more conservative way to enter. Anyway, we make the new low and we start up. I only see this higher low as an entry opportunity, and then suddenly it turns and runs straight down again. And so you don't really get any warning here. Maybe this is, you treat this like a failed breakout. Maybe this is a little bit of a congested area here. After the fact, you can kind of see it. So maybe that's what you're looking at there. And maybe I just missed it in real time, and you get the breakout that fails and turns down, then it breaks out the bottom and fails and turns up. But this runs up, you get a close outside, new high, try to go higher once, and you try to go higher twice. Again, this was a failed second entry long, and it sets up fairly well. The only problem is I still see 2 legs here, but it's hard. It would be hard to count the leg from there, because you got this sideways and then you drop down, but it does try to go higher and then down again. So it looks like 2 legs. I don't think I would wait till this bar closed to go short. That's my problem, and I don't know that I want to trade this as an engulfing bar because of that inside bar. You can get tripped up on those. So, I mean, if you took that one, if you traded it as a reversal, I would only trade that as an engulfing bar or reversal. And then in seeing it that way, it's pretty aggressive. And anyway, we continue on down, and now we get a break of this trend line. 2 legs back. There's a second entry there. That's very tempting, because you are looking for a possible new low. The problem is that we're back inside this trend line, and we're just above the EMA, and you notice how it got support off that EMA. It could have turned up there, and that's what I mean. If you draw your little short-term or micro trend, you don't have a break of it, and that's what concerns me there. Um, so I just don't think you want to go short right there, even though it's your second entry, even though you're probably still looking for a new low, because you see it never gets a new low and then it reverses. And it could have just bounced off the EMA and reversed, or uh, gone just enough to trap you in and reverse regardless of where it actually went to. But and then we're working higher here. You can't go long out of that. It fails and comes back and then takes off again, but I don't see any setup here to go long. Um, although we are expecting prices to try to make a new high after the break of this trend line. Finally, you get a second entry long here. This is just a double top, so this looks like a first entry, then it turns down again and turns back up, and when it breaks above this bar, it's a second entry. I'd wait for this to close and use that, and just use our regular rules, one tick above that and go along with it. That turns out to be a nice move, and then it comes back down again. Again, we're still looking to try to make a new high here, and it starts finding resistance here. You got to be careful going short. You want a really good setup, and you got to be careful going long into the resistance as well. So again, you need a pretty good setup, and I just don't see anything in there. I don't see any shorts that I would like. I don't see any longs that I would like. There's just nothing there. We're just kind of working sideways. And then finally it does break out, runs up, makes your new high that you're expecting. You can see that high is higher than the last high. So now you've had your break of your blue channel trend line, and ugly and very choppy move all the way to a new high, and then it just sells off. And unfortunately, you don't get a chance to go short until here. Notice you get a first entry, second entry. So technically it's a failed second entry long. It just looks like one leg down though, and so it's kind of hard to treat that as a failure. And it could come back. Usually it'll come back and test this before going lower, and so you could get hung up there with that ugly bar. So I marked it as a reversal, a little aggressive. This is most likely a clear trend line, but I'd want to see us touch it again before I believed in it. And then, of course, what happens, we just bounce off the lows here and end up going lower again. So, and we get the break of the yellow channel. And so you can't go short there really into that support, even though you're looking for a low. And notice it does make a low and then turns up. But you don't get any setup before it gets back in the range. You might trade this as a high or low. It's really difficult to do that right there. But you might trade that. It's a possibility. And then of course it just takes off out of here, and again it just chops higher and pushes on, and no real setups there. You do get a second entry long here in this uptrend. But that's an inside bar, not a very good setup. So I'd just skip that one. Again, it looks a little congested. It works, but you just never know. And so, of course, we get the break of the green channel, a couple legs up, and then we're just kind of chopping along here. You might have traded this one because you do have your break and a couple legs up, and you're a long way away from the EMA. Fairly bearish, but those highs closing back inside that trend line. That worries me a little bit. Again, it's another one you could argue. And then, of course, you got a lower high here, or a double top, however you want to look at it. And prices, there's enough room here. I didn't really mark it because this is just so congested looking, but I think there's enough room there, so you could argue for that one too. I wouldn't take any of these others in here. You see right here, there was of course, you got more of them here than you do here. So it looks even more congested, and you can kind of see we're hung between the two, and there's not much room back to the midline there. So that one's even less desirable, and you can't go long there. And it breaks out instantly, comes back, and it really just kind of gets back in that range again. Except this time you get a first entry, and you try to go lower. You actually get a second entry there, and then you turn down and bounce, and you come back, and it closes outside. So I like going long there. Um, if this hadn't closed above that resistance there, I'd say no way. Um, but by now, you could argue you got a triple test with a very bullish bar, and it's like a reversal type bar too. So I like going long there. You're just looking for a scalp. Um, this kind of cleared out most of your issues. You still got to worry about that resistance there, though. That's why it had to close above it. But this kind of clears out things to some degree. But sometimes it'll come back and get stuck back in there and build up all over again. This time it didn't. It keeps going higher. And I don't see any way to go. I don't see any longs I'd be interested in. And then you're just chopping along. There's no chance to get long or short here. Comes back, and this is where you kind of have to watch for this trend line right here. It bounces again, and you got to wonder why it keeps bouncing a little higher. So if you didn't catch the trend line here, definitely want to catch it here, but because you can see the pink range. But why we start bouncing early, there's a reason that prices don't come all the way back to the low, even though they get through the midline. And it's the reason it bounces higher here than it did here and here. So look for that some possibility, and you can kind of see where, even though this is really, you can trade this both ways all through here, it still has a slight upward bias to it, because every time we come back, we're making higher lows. So, and eventually we'll probably make higher highs, which we do. So you can trade this both ways. I just didn't see anything in there I liked. There's a double top here, a little lower high on a second entry, but it's still inside this, still inside that micro channel, and so that makes it a little risky in my opinion. And then you got one coming down, you close outside a new low, but no setup there. And then we're just in a tighter range right here. No way to get long on that. Of course, you got this channel working up, this micro channel. You get a two legs down on a close outside. So again, there's a second entry there, but no setup that we really like. You might have said there's a higher low here, but now it looks congested. Show you what I'm seeing there. So it looks congested again, but it fails on the breakout, and then you get that push higher that fails, and look how bearish that is. I like going short right there. You may take this lower high. The problem with it is, again, you got support across there, and you're right into that EMA. We did break out of the range here, so we're very likely to come back and test this. So if you understand that, maybe you trade that. I marked it green. I'm not crazy about it. But notice we run back, we get inside. We got this yellow channel working down, and you get a break of it, and then you get a second entry, and notice how that acts as resistance once, twice. That's a good sign that it's probably going to go lower, even if only temporary. We'll probably try to make a new low here, come back to the main trend line, and we may even come all the way back down to here. So I like that setup there. And of course we find it bounces off that trend line again. Again, it looks a little congested down here until here, but notice you got that low, and you try to go short once, twice, and so if it breaks above this bar, it's probably going higher. Just make sure you got room to get out between where you enter and this high right here, this resistance. And that does, I mean, it gives a little resistance and then breaks on through, and it's gone. So this was another nice setup here, and really you're just hoping to get a scalp out of that. It's a little aggressive because it is a little sideways, but there's clearly a trap there, and it takes off. And then of course you get the close outside, and it's just chopping sideways. It does this a lot, and it just doesn't give you a chance to trade it. And then it finally runs up. It actually made a new high right here. Notice you get your close outside and two legs up to a new high. If there hadn't been those three matching lows there, I'd say, hey, you might want to try to go short there. but that congestion keeps you out of it, and then it runs higher, and it runs up here. And notice, now you got this two legs up here, and then you make this lower high. It actually breaks higher and turns down. You might even trade that one on the engulfing bar, because that's probably going to trap people. And even if you don't, you might still go sideways there. You might let it break lower and drop a limit order. There's a little bit of stem there. I think it probably still closes in this lower 1/3. This is a pretty good move down, and then we just find support down here again. There's a little bounce right here that you might say, okay, we've tested it a few times here, and then you get a little double test. And we do have a new low in place. We got the break and a new low. We tried to go higher, and then we made another new low. So we could be trying to go lower here, because when this one didn't take off, that makes this one. You want to see rejection here. What you'd like to see is it run down here and do like it did, hit and turn up, and then close high. That looks like rejection. This does not look like rejection. And you see it struggle to get through the EMA before it went higher. So you got to be careful with that trade. I don't think you can go long down there. This one it just runs up, turns and runs back down. Maybe you get an overshoot there. It's hard to know. I mean, we're just chopping around in the middle here, and this is where you got to be real careful, in the middle of this pink range. And it's hard to know we got a range probably yet, but it's pretty obvious we got some support. So if you saw the right trade to the upside, maybe you take it until you figure out that, hey, we're in a range here when we turn back down and find more resistance. But there's a lower high here that's too congested. Even though you figure it's hard to say this is a range yet completely. It may just be support. So, but now you come back and you try to go higher once, twice, 3 times. Look how bearish that bar is. It breaks higher first, turns down. Plus you got the yellow channel, and that's the first close out of it. So that's a second entry short, very bearish bar. You're looking to make a new low, plenty of room back to the midline. I like that trade. And that turns out to be another nice move. And we find support down here again. Got one working up, close outside, new high, one working down, close outside, new low. Now I like this one to the downside, because this one had played out up, and notice you try to go higher once, twice, and that's the first break of that. And you can clearly see there's a little channel there. So you'll probably make a new low there, test these lows if nothing else. So if you got room there, take that trade. And of course it bounces. There is a higher low here, but I don't like trading that. You can see we've tried to go higher multiple times there and failed. Breaks out again, turns straight down. This one just runs straight up, straight down, and then we're running straight up again. So this market's really tough to get a handle on right here. It's just hard to trade this. Now several of these were all playing out until here, and then now none of them are playing out. You might argue this one did because you get a close outside here, but it's just a little bit of resistance there. And it runs on up. And then we're chopping sideways again until you get a failed breakout. And so I like trading that one. You could also argue that's a second entry long. We're not looking for second entries there. It's late in the day. I marked it green, but and notice where we found that resistance at our measured move. That would probably explain why right in the middle of nowhere you suddenly see this resistance. You can see it's right at our measured move. And then notice it comes back and tests that before it goes higher. More evidence that that measured move was probably correct. I wasn't the only one seeing that. There's some reason you were finding support and resistance to that area, and you can see it right along here too. And it's probably the measured move. And you can see too that was also some of the highs from yesterday, and so that's another reason. I mean, we've made some highs here a couple of times, so we've been finding resistance there. So that's multiple reasons why it's acting as support and resistance now. If we're going to rally and reverse and go higher, then that'll probably hold us support and we'll work higher off of it. So we'll see. But that's how I saw it today. Again, you got to catch these moves early or you just about don't get an opportunity. And it's been that way. You know, we're seeing that quite often lately. And it's just because it's a volatile market. And I mean, even though we're in an uptrend right here, when you see these, when it starts looking like this, where you see these pink channels, even though they're, you know, you got some pretty consistent support there, and then suddenly we don't. It's not consistent. You got some, and notice your resistance is not consistent either. It's at different places, but it's still a range. And notice how we're going below the EMA, above the EMA, below the EMA, above the EMA, below the EMA, above it, below it, above it, below it. When you see that, it's like a roller coaster. You can trade that both ways. So notice there's not even any really good long setups. They're all short here. Normally I would tell you in an uptrend you can't trade, you can't counter trend trade, but because it's, watch that EMA, it gives you good clues. If everything's above the EMA like this, you're looking to go long unless your trend line's ended or, you know, you're at some point here that you're looking for prices to suddenly reverse. But usually you want to be looking for longs when it's like that. When it's consistently below the EMA, which we might have to go back to somewhere where you're like that, you're looking for shorts. But when it's back and forth, above and below, like right in there, even though there's no consistent range area in there, you can still trade that both ways. That's where you draw your short-term micro channels and things, and short and little small ranges like this and so forth. So, but anyway, we're almost 30 minutes here, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. I'm probably going to take off Friday. We don't have a chart lesson on Friday anyway, but for any of you that might be looking for the mid-morning report or me to answer some kind of emails or something, I'm probably going to take the day off Friday and take a 3-day weekend. So hadn't made up my mind yet, but I've got some things I'd like to do and reason I'd like to take a long weekend here. So if you don't hear from me on Friday, you can assume I took an extended weekend and took the day off. So just kind of a heads up for people. Again, it won't really matter here on YouTube because I don't do a chart lesson on Fridays anyway. But there it is, folks. Once again, I saw it as 2 channels up. Maybe if your price action was more like a little different, you might have been able to get a trend up there. I got something close, but I could never get anything that looked anything nearly as bullish as this MES chart. That thing, golly. Whenever Windows does an update and this thing, I have to restart my computer, or my mouse acts crazy. I can restart it and it'll quit, but it does this every time my computer does an update. But there it is. So I'm going to restart my computer, so I won't have to deal with this crazy mouse tomorrow. But anyway, I mean, you can see how bullish that looks, and I just can't get my regular chart to look anything like that. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next